Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Beijing and Washington hold a call to discuss bilateral trade and economic ties as issues from soybean orders to computer chips remain problematic despite the trade truce in October. China's He Lifeng holds dialogue with Trump officials, Besant and Greer. China warns Japan against reviving militarism as Tokyo boosts defense spending, eyes missile exports. China condemns Japan's prime minister for suggesting possible military action over Taiwan. Dutch minister admits being blindsided by China's retaliation in Xperia chip prices. Karman's faces criticism after Beijing choked off chip flows and scrutiny of his move to invoke a Cold War-era security law. China's officials say the country will work with the US on salient global narcotics issues based on the principles of equality and mutual respect, adding that authorities on both sides are implementing consensus reached between China, US leaders at Busan in South Korea. The US Supreme Court agrees to hear a case on whether some children born in the United States have a constitutional right to citizenship. In January, Trump had signed an order to end birthright citizenship for those born to parents who are illegal in the country, but the move was blocked by multiple lower courts. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky removes his former chief of staff Andriy Yermak from the National Security Council amid a sprawling corruption investigation that has rocked Kyiv. Yermak is also no longer a member of the Stavka, the High Command of Ukraine's armed forces, according to two presidential decrees. FIFA Awards President Donald Trump was awarded the new FIFA Peace Prize at the 2026 World Cup draw, giving the spectacle to set up matchups for the quadrennial soccer tournament even more of a Trumpian flair. Trump welcomes U.S. vaccine advisors scrapping a long-standing recommendation that all American newborns receive the hepatitis B shot and signed a memo to review aligning child immunization recommendations. And viewers, Ukrainian and US officials will hold a third straight day of talks in Miami on November 6, focusing on a potential plan to end the conflict in Ukraine. Washington stressed that both sides agreed real progress hinges on Russia's deadline to pursue long-term peace, including measures to de-escalate the conflict and stop ongoing violence. U.S. President Donald Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner hold talks with top Ukrainian negotiator Rustem Umerov and Andriy Nathov, chief of staff of Kyiv's armed forces. The discussions followed a previous meeting between Witkoff, Kushner and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow, where parts of the U.S. proposal were rejected. Officials agreed on the framework for security arrangements and discussed necessary deterrence capabilities to sustain lasting peace. The U.S. plan envisions Ukraine returning some territory in exchange for security guarantees, although details remain uncertain. Glenn Grant, the former advisor to the Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Latvia. Thank you, Glenn, for joining us here at NewsX World. We do appreciate you speaking to us. Now, several rounds of talks are held and another one is due. At this point in time, we know that all discussions are held behind closed doors. But what do you think largely could be the key sticking points, that are preventing the deal from reaching a consensus?
Well, same as they have been the last year, which is last 3 years, which is that Russia demands that Ukraine gives up its territory, that it gives up any right to join NATO, and that basically it reduces its armed forces to a non-working level. And on the Ukrainian side, they just say, and quite rightly, no, we're not going to do any of those three things. And I don't think we're going to get past that. I mean, what America is trying to do is to trying to steal Ukrainian resources. They're looking at the American peace plan is about business. It's not about peace. And they want to open up the Russian market, and they want to steal everything they can from Ukraine, including the money that Russia has in trust. But you know, I can't see this moving forward at the moment. And if it does, I can tell you the front line is not going to give up if Russia says there's peace in a hurry.
Well, I agree to you, and also particularly after both US and Ukraine say that real progress now depends on Russia. Now, without Putin conceding, we don't see the negotiations coming to a fruition at all, do we?
No, we don't. And I mean, the Ukrainians have no choice in a way but to keep talking to America, because the US is playing this game, and the US still has all the resources and the intelligence that Ukraine needs. So they can't really pull out and say, you know, go away. So they'll keep playing this game as long as they have to. But I don't see any end to it, whilst Putin has no intention of stopping.
Well, absolutely. Do stay on. There's some more relevant information coming in this regard. Viewers, a Ukrainian state railway company confirms that a railway hub near Kyiv was struck in a large-scale Russian drone and missile attack, damaging the depot and several railway carriages. No casualties were reported in the town of Fastiv, but several suburban train services near Kyiv and Chernihiv were cancelled. Emergency services confirmed fires and destruction at the railway station and depot. Ukrainian officials said Russia launched 653 drones and 51 missiles overnight, with the Ukrainian forces intercepting some of them, 585 drones and 30 missiles. The attacks targeted power and heat generation facilities across Chernihiv, Zaporizhia, Lviv, Dnipro and Odessa regions, leaving thousands without electricity, heat and water. Port facilities in Odessa were also affected, forcing operators to switch to backup generators. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha condemned the strikes, calling them attacks on critical civilian infrastructure and warning that no measures to strengthen Ukraine should be delayed. Emergency repair work is underway to restore services safely and quickly. And I request Glenn to join us back in the discussion here.
I'm here.
Glenn, please help us understand the significance of the area that's now under the fresh strikes. Fastiv, at least 653
Yeah.
missiles fired once again here.
I mean, basically, what what Russia is doing is collecting all its missiles together over 3 to 4 days, and then making a mass attack, which then overwhelms the air defense system. The air defenses against drones are relatively successful. They simply haven't got enough people to stop the Russian attack, and the Russian attacks are trying to actually to destroy the capacity of civil society to continue. So, you know, destroying water, destroying electricity, and it's everywhere. It's not just any one or two regions. So each time there's a major attack, they focus upon somewhere new, and that, of course, forces the air defenses to be even more stretched.
All right. Well, thank you for your comment, Glenn. I will now move on, viewers. There's news on the Indigo's operational crisis in India. Following operational crisis that's currently affecting India's largest civil airline, Indigo, India's Ministry of Civil Aviation has stepped in to curb what it calls unusually high airfares charged by some airlines during the current disruption. The government has invoked its regulatory powers and imposed temporary fare caps across all affected routes to ensure pricing remains fair and reasonable. In a formal directive issued Friday, airlines have been ordered to strictly adhere to the new limits until the situation stabilizes. Officials say the move is aimed at preventing opportunistic pricing and protecting passengers who urgently need to travel, including senior citizens, students, and medical patients. The ministry will track fare levels through real-time data and maintain close coordination with carriers and online travel platforms. Authorities warn that any deviation from the prescribed caps will trigger immediate corrective action in public interest. And Jitendra Bhargav, who is a former executive director at Air India and author of the book The Descent of Air India, now joins us live. Thank you, Mr. Bhargav, for joining us here at NewsX World. We are happy to have you here. Now, corrective measures being taken by the Ministry of Civil Aviation, but to protect the passengers, how are the other airlines going to manage the huge influx of passengers that are left behind?
Let's get to the genesis of the issue that the DGCA had revised the flight duty time limitation, given airlines adequate time to increase the strength of pilots required, because once you say that the night time would now be 12 to 6 p.m. instead of 12 to 5 a.m., and that you will not be able to allowed to be making more than 2 landings. So with that, the strength of the pilots had to be augmented. Some airlines did. Indigo perhaps faltered. They were under a false illusion that they will be able to get DGCA to grant a further extension on the implementation, which did not come. So the normal course, what an airline would do is to match the flight schedule with the number of pilots available. In my opinion, Indigo faltered on that count. If they had announced cancellation of flights, keeping in view the number of pilots they had on the rolls, and let the passengers know in advance, we would have avoided the kind of chaotic situation we witnessed at various airports. Fares going up, passengers stranded, angry passengers letting out their anger on the staff at the airport. They were ugly scenes to be looked at and all those things. Now, DGCA had finally to come in and said, look, we were reluctant to give you extension, but in view of the chaotic situation that we have created over a period of 4 or 5 days through large-scale cancellations, DGCA relented and said, on certain parameters, we'll give you relaxation, keeping in view the need to mitigate the crisis that we have on hand. It does not amount to any compromise on safety, etc. It is only that DGCA and the government Ministry of Civil Aviation want the flight operations to get normalized as soon as possible. So this is a limited time relaxation till February 10. In the meantime, Indigo will have to augment the strength of pilots so that there is no curtailment. People have been arguing that if the Indigo had voluntarily cancelled flights, well, that also would have led to a mayhem of a different kind. Shrinkage of capacity in the market at a time when the demand is growing, tourist season is on, it would have meant higher fares to be paid by all passengers. So it was a catch-22 situation. We really have no go, and we only wish that the problem we have on hand normalizes. Ministry of Civil Aviation has played its role, DGC has played its role. Now it is up to the Indigo management to pull up the socks and said, look, we created the problem, but we will come out with a solution also very fast in view of the relaxation given by DGCA.
Mr. Bhargav, but there are also allegations that the pilots were saying they were ready to be rostered, but they were not put on schedules. And in fact, also that the DGCA was asked by Indigo to fold.
Let me explain this way. Indigo has had a remarkable historic past. 19 years of operation, professionalism in operations, profitable airline. It defies logic as to how they faltered on this last 5 days that we are talking about. Pilots' cooperation is key to it. Pilots are a key component of the aviation industry. If they were not taken into confidence, again, the fault lies with the management of Indigo. And if one says that, look, we are going to be extending necessary cooperation in ensuring that as many flights can be operated by Indigo, they must be. Because ultimately, what harms Indigo's reputation, let's not forget, it also harms the reputation of the employees, the pilots particularly. So it should have been a joint effort, but somewhere somebody has gone wrong. And as I said earlier, professionalism has been there in Indigo. It has been India's only profitable airline, growing at a rapid pace, commanding 65% market share of the domestic market. And yet, what we have witnessed is something which is inexcusable. One can call it criminal for the simple reason that the number of passengers impacted, affected, made to pay much higher fares on alternate flights, etc., is simply not condonable.
Sure. And coming back to my original question, which was that while the government is trying to prevent opportunistic prices, the load gets passed on to the other airlines who may be taking additional tours and routes. How are they going to manage with this additional load of passengers, and how does it affect them?
No, we need to understand that this is peak tourist season when a lot of people come from abroad, etc., because of
Right.
winter season that they come in. So the number of seats that may be available on different airlines would not be more than 10%. They have an average load factor of 85% in the normal circumstances, which means 85% of the seats are occupied. Now, how could you have accommodated the Indigo passengers? As I said earlier, what people have been debating and what experts will debate over the next few years, that when you have a dominant player, 65% market share, in a crisis situation, can the other airlines bail out? The answer is simply no. And yes, they can bail out, but to a limited extent. But had Indigo forewarned, not allowed the situation to go out of hand, curtailed the number of the flight schedule voluntarily rather than it allowing it to have a cascading effect on the flight operations, they would have perhaps contained a problem to much lower level. And as I said earlier, no airline would deliberately ruin its image, public perception of an airline. Why it happened, how it happened, it will be only, I think, desirable for the board of directors of Indigo, Indigo owners, Indigo management to analyze it and say, why did we get into such a terrible mess?
Finally, Mr. Bhargav, what is a proposal, a potential proposal that you would like to give to resolve the current mess?
Look, DGCA has already done it, taken the initiative. Earlier, it was reluctant to grant any relaxation to Indigo in the new revised norms on flight duty time limitation. But looking at the crisis situation, need to normalize operations at the earliest, DGCA has, with certain riders, granted them relaxation. And so that should help Indigo mount more services, maintain its normal schedule, and I think limit its cancellation over the next 2, 3, 4 days to a very small number. And perhaps, as the CEO of Indigo has stated, that between 10th and 15th, they should be able to get back to total normal operations.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bhargav, for speaking to us and helping us with your perspective on the issue. We appreciate you taking time out to speak to us. And with that, viewers, we will move on. Now, Myanmar citizens have begun casting early ballots for the country's widely criticized election, with a small number voting on Saturday at the Myanmar embassy in Bangkok. The junta, which seized power in 2021, says phased polls starting later this month will lead the country back to peace and democracy. But the election scope continues to shrink as the junta-appointed election commission has now cancelled voting in nearly 1,600 village areas, saying conditions are not suitable for free and fair polls. Early overseas voting is underway at a handful of embassies. The turnout appeared low in Bangkok, with only about 25 voters seen in the first 2 hours. Some participants expressed hope for peace and development, while many others refused to take part, calling the vote a fake showcase under military rule. Critics, including the deposed lawmakers and rights groups, are saying the process is designed to entrench the junta rather than restore democracy. And now moving on to news from Indonesia. The death from the cyclone-driven floods and landslides in Indonesia has risen to 883, with hundreds still missing across West Sumatra, North Sumatra and Aceh, as landslides have cut power and blocked roads, hampering rescue efforts. However, heavy equipment and food supplies only reached Aceh province in Indonesia as land access began to reopen following a catastrophic floods and landslides last week. Over 800 and thousands displaced. Meanwhile, a resident has responded. Let's take a look.
Orang-orang pada teriak minta tolong semua, Mbak. Minta tolong, cuman karena airnya sudah debit airnya sudah pada tinggi, orang nggak berani gitu. Saya minta tolong anak bayi saya aja biar diselamatin, cuman nggak ada yang berani gitu. Selama berapa hari itu air nggak ada, kita satu rumah juga pada akhirnya momen nggak ada air bersih.
And now moving on, the UN nuclear watchdog, on a strike that Ukraine has attributed to Russia, said that a protective shield at the Chernobyl nuclear plant in war-torn Ukraine, built to contain radioactive material from the 1986 disaster, can no longer perform its main safety function due to drone damage. The International Atomic Energy Agency said an inspection last week of the steel confinement structure completed in 2019 found the drone impact in February, as in 3 years into Russia-Ukraine war has degraded the structure. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's energy ministry has said that automated safety systems were activated during a Ukrainian drone attack and there were no leaks from the oil pipeline. The Kazakh authority has said that the automated safety systems worked the way they were supposed to, and the pipelines remained hermetically sealed and there were no environmental threat. And up next, viewers, news from Kenya, where Kenyan authorities have released a parliamentary report accusing the British Army Training Unit, Kenya, known as BATUK, of decades-long human rights violations and environmental damage. The inquiry by Kenya's Defense, Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee documents repeated cases of sexual abuse by British soldiers, including rape and assault, with allegations that victims were left unsupported and children fathered by soldiers abandoned. One of the most serious cases referenced is the 2012 death of a young Kenyan woman whose body was found in a hotel septic tank, a case which was long linked by British locals as because of the BATUK personnel. Lawmakers also accused the unit of environmental destruction, citing unexploded ordnance left behind, poor waste disposal and military debris that allegedly caused injuries, deaths and long-term land degradation. The report describes BATUK's presence as resembling an occupying force rather than a defense partner, calling for tougher oversight, legal accountability and compensation mechanisms for victims. The UK government, meanwhile, has said it regrets the findings and is open to investigating new allegations once evidence is formally presented. The report has intensified debate in Kenya over foreign military presence as affected communities push for justice, transparency and long overdue reforms. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.